So I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Um, for our first workshop of this afternoon, we have a representative from Sanofi Genzyme, Peter Adamson, and I'll just let him take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Tanya. It's a real pleasure to be here at MIT's Hacking Medicine Grand Hack. As Tanya said, I'm Peter Adamson. I'm Global Head of Oncology Development as well as Pediatric Innovation at Sanofi. Our workshop talk title today is Where Science Meets Innovation, Cancer, Aging, and the Future of Healthcare. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment because when I connected, I was in a very quiet spot. Hopefully you can still hear me, but that's not a virtual background, that's a real background. I am outside, but I'll try to speak directly into the my headphone set and we'll be all right. So Sanofi is very proud to have sponsored two tracks this afternoon, Customized Cancer Care and the Future of Aging. But before drilling down into those, I just want to take a few moments to introduce myself, how I ended up at Sanofi, actually, and why I'm very excited about what's happening today and tomorrow with the Grand Hack. I'm a pediatric oncologist and a clinical pharmacologist. Most of my career has been in academia, focused on new drug development for children with cancer. I was at the National Cancer Institute and then Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and University of Pennsylvania. And most recently, before joining Sanofi about half a year ago, I led a group of about 220 children's hospitals, universities, other academic medical centers, US, Canada, and globally in childhood cancer research. And I learned a lot by doing that as far as leading a large research enterprise. And I also learned some of the real challenges we face, not just in academic research, but in cancer research in general, and some of the challenges, of course, that the patients that I help care for face each day. And one of the problems that many of us have noted, it actually takes too long to get started in research. You can have a great idea today. It might take you 2, 3, or more years to start studying that idea. And as you grow older, as I have, you get impatient and you begin to look for ways to speed that timeline up. And it requires innovation. And what I learned is that if you really want to innovate, you have to start engaging people who think about problems differently than you do. So it used to be, and in some cases it still is, doctors think they know everything. And I can say that because I'm a doctor. We think we know everything, we can solve everything. The reality is we cannot. The problems have become quite complex. And when you engage people of different backgrounds, you begin to understand that they see problems differently than you do. And what emerges then is they see potential solutions that you wouldn't otherwise see. So as part of my prior journey, I started engaging process engineers. I heavily engage with parent advocacy groups. And I even, because what we wanted to do was raise more resources for our research, I started meeting with a lot of, well, there were CEOs, but they were my children's age. They were tech startups to begin to learn, well, how do you communicate in today's age? How do you innovate? So what I want to instill today as you take on these two tracks is a sense of urgency into this challenge. When you're diagnosed with cancer, your world changes. Your family's world changes. It's before diagnosis and after. And one thing that many cancer patients do not have is time. They don't have time to wait for better treatment, time to wait for better care, time to wait for better research. They need those treatments today. So that's why I'm excited about what you'll be doing today. We're bringing together people who I know will think about challenges differently from the way physicians think about them and the way many people have either been engaged in this process for a long time or engaged for a short time think about them. So let me now on the two challenges. The first one is customized cancer care. And let me tell you what I think when we talk about that. We often talk about cancer as a single disease. As I said, someone is diagnosed with cancer. Well, we've known throughout modern medicine that cancer is many diseases. And for decades, we were guided by what the pathologists would tell us. They would look at a section of tumor under a microscope, and they begin to classify tumors. And we ended up with a list of well over 100 cancers. And then dawned the era of genomics. And we learned that that was far too simplistic a view of what cancer is. There are, in fact, many, many hundreds of different subtypes of cancers. So the complexity of our problem has grown significantly as we've learned more. But not only are there variations within a cancer, there are variations within populations. And increasingly, there are variations between the types of treatments we might use. So none of us would be here right now if a cure was easy. If you were diagnosed with strep throat, you would go to the doctor, you get 10 days of an antibiotic, and you'd be cured. And there'd be very low risk of side effects. And for many of us, that's where we want to be with cancer, but we know we're far away. And in fact, where we have headed is not take 10 days of penicillin, but to cancer care that's increasingly complex. And the complexities have a range of pros, they have a range of cons. And in fact, each of those is associated with a range of probabilities. So how do we customize care? We have to be able to integrate the key variables in how we're going to recommend it. And one of our biggest challenges, in fact, is in communication, in communicating what a diagnosis means, what the treatment options are, what the probabilities of success, what the probabilities of side effects are, and integrate it in a customized way. So when my colleagues at Sanofi said, "Oh, we'd love you to give an introduction to a group being sponsored at MIT," I realized that I had to be careful not to channel my inner nerd. And trust me, there is indeed an inner nerd here. And so I'm going to tread carefully here and talk a little bit about some history about communication. And when I get it wrong, just send me an email and I'll get it right next time. But I've been around a while. And in 1985, someone by the name of Friedhelm Hillebrand, and that might be a name known to some of you, but he began typing out sentences, and many, many different kinds of sentences. And when he looked at that, he saw that the vast majority of sentences could be captured in 160 characters. Now, the other thing that emerged when I was younger was cellular technology. And what I have subsequently learned is that when cell phones communicate with cell towers, they have to carry packets of information. Those packets were restricted to 140 characters. So fast forward from when I was younger to a much more recent generation, 140 characters, well, that's where Twitter began. Now, people, and my children are amongst them, they prohibit me from getting on Twitter, and with good reason. And in fact, I've been instructed to avoid most social media because I would undoubtedly do something highly embarrassing to them. But nonetheless, people communicate in ways today that are very different than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the challenge is, how can we begin to communicate a life-changing event with life-changing information with vast amounts of data that have to be integrated? Now, what physicians do now is more often than not, it's not working well. Communication is central to the care of patients. And it's also central to, if we are to succeed in customizing care, it's central to that process as well. We know that every patient who's diagnosed is going to bring a variation of many different factors that will impact their cancer care. That might be how is an individual patient doing? What other medical problems do they have? What side effects might they be experiencing? What are their outcomes in their eyes? And then we have an exponentially increasing amount of genomic information that is allowing us to classify diseases, and an increasingly diverse range of treatment approaches that each have a variation of potential success, and unfortunately, each have a variation on potential side effects. We have to be able to integrate this information, and it can come from diverse sources. It can come from the laboratory. It can come from psychosocial assessment. It can include educational approaches, guidances. But we need to innovate on how we can begin to customize care for patients to cancer. So as you start working today and coming up with solutions, I want you to keep in mind 2 points. What can we develop to support healthcare providers and patients in building customized treatment plans that lead to better health outcomes? And how can we encourage the consistent adoption of individualized treatment plans? And just to be clear, so a treatment plan is really a roadmap that can be drawn up at the start of treatment, that can be shared with a healthcare team, and most importantly, with the patient and their family. And if you document that and provide that roadmap, that gives you the foundation of customized care, recognizing that there may be turns that occur later on, but we really need to focus on how we can do that. So now let me turn to the other challenge, the future of aging. So Sanofi launched When Cancer Grows Old earlier this year because many of us recognize the urgency around addressing specific challenges that a diagnosis of cancer brings to older patients. So we've been collaborating with the global cancer community of patients, of advocates, healthcare providers to find solutions and create change across the entire continuum of care so that aging patients with cancer can have the best possible chance to live longer and fuller lives. So you might ask, well, what does a pediatric oncologist know about caring for aging patients? And I can tell you it ranges from knowing little to knowing a lot. And the relevance of a pediatric oncologist perspective, I think, will become evident as we care for aging population. So pediatric cancers are rare. And I'm going to start talking about pediatric cancers, and then I'm going to leap to the other end of the continuum. Pediatric cancers are rare, and there are a number of them. And when we care for a child with cancer, our goal is to restore them to full health. Now, where we're very fortunate in oncology is that we have the largest participation of patients and families of any medical specialty that exists. Upwards of 60% of patients and families who are diagnosed with cancer participate in research. And that, in fact, has driven the cure rates to overall 80% of children diagnosed today become 5-year survivors. Now, our treatments are too toxic. We still have a long way to go, but it's that participation in research that has made the difference. And when my colleagues in medical oncology, including colleagues who take care of the aging population, ask me, well, how do you have such high participation? Because if you look across the rest of the cancer spectrum, perhaps 3, no more than 4% of patients participate. There are a number of answers, but I think the most important answer is that every child comes to the clinic with a mom and with a dad. And you can't underestimate the importance of having a support system where a mom knows exactly what tests are being done, knows exactly the time, knows exactly the results of the last tests, and is bringing that child to every appointment, to every examination, to every test along the way. It is a remarkable support system that has directly contributed to an improved outcome. Now, when we shift to the aging population, too often find ourselves without support systems for our parents, for our grandparents. Those support systems need attention because without them, progress is going to be limited. So the other real important piece of data is that we're all living longer. Globally, 60% of people who have cancer today are actually 65 years or older. And this number is expected to double over the next 2 decades in almost every part of the world. Now, older patients with cancer face unique healthcare challenges. One of the challenges, or a number of those challenges, actually emerge because bias exists. And this is not ill-intended bias, and it's usually bias that comes from a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding. But bias exists at multiple levels. It can exist at how we screen for cancer. Recommendations for screening for cancer can be overlooked or ignored in elderly patients. Participating in research. Well, as you age, you do have more medical issues often, but that doesn't mean you can't participate in research. But a bias exists, and we often do not enroll older patients in research. There are some treatments that may give better outcomes, but are more aggressive, and they may be associated with higher risk of side effects. But there are older patients who likely could tolerate such treatments and would choose such treatments, but we're biased against even offering it to them. And all this has contributed to a lack of evidence related to caring for patients, older patients. Our support systems fall short. They fall dramatically short of where we were fortunate to have them in pediatric oncology. But it extends beyond that. Even public health policies, when these policies are developed, they don't fully consider the impact of these policies on an aging population. So there are real age-related challenges that are aligned, unfortunately, to negatively impact not only the access to cancer care, but also to the outcome of cancer care for older patients. And I think this has been brought to light, most unfortunately, with the current COVID-19 pandemic, where our population suffered the most and continues to suffer the most is in the elderly population. There are clear gaps that we have to fill in caring for a globally aging population, and we need to significantly improve our care system. So as you work today, please remember these two objectives. How can we address the bias against older cancer patients to assure access to optimal care and treatment? And how can oncologists and, importantly, other healthcare professionals be more conscious of the unique healthcare challenges facing older patients to ensure that decisions about cancer care, treatment, participation in research are driven by the overall health of the patient rather than the age of the patient? So I want to thank you for taking the time out of what I know are difficult and busy times to participate in this weekend's hackathon. And I'm actually confident that we're going to see some creative solutions and hopefully some bold and impactful solutions that can help us move forward and overcome some of these challenges. So I think we have a few minutes to open it up for questions, and I'm going to do that and hopefully can navigate through those questions. I will point out that if I can't, there are mentors working with the teams who likely can even better address these questions than I, but let's open up the floor.
Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Thanks so much for sharing about your extensive background, including that you're a doctor and you guys know everything, but thanks so much for sharing. We're trying to focus on future of aging, and myself and my team members, we don't belong to the demographic of seniors. I wonder, where can we have a handful of seniors that we can interview this weekend? Just to give us that one-on-one primary market research voice that we can input into what we're designing. Because one of the saddest things is to build something for somebody you never really heard from.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'm going to punt that one to some of the mentors. But what I would also say is, while that's an important component, a component that would include experiences that you've had in different realms of in different life areas might be highly relevant. Yes, you want to pressure test ideas. So I'm going to ask the mentors that are working with your group what the opportunities are, given the time constraints in doing this. But I certainly concur with the importance of that being a part of any solution.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. And this is Zubi from Austin. Thanks so much. Appreciate your answer.
Thanks, Zubi.
Hello. Hi, this is Venkata. And hello. I have a question regarding, can I still go on with the question?
Oh, yes, please do, Venkata.
Okay. So I have a question about regarding like if, because interoperability has become pretty much a law right now. So how does it affect with the treatment plan and outcome on the patients?
Yeah, so a great question. So interoperability, we have, as you know better than I, we have an increasing number of systems that are required to care for patients, and certainly to care for patients with cancer. And I say increasing because it is increasing. The high density data, genomic data, is enormous in and of itself. And so systems that can move that data, look at laboratory result data, look at clinical care data, and the interoperability that these all have to play in the sandbox nicely together. So I think for the customized care plan, that that can be a part of it, but I don't know if I would make it the major focus of where to direct your thinking, because this is an area where a lot of people and solutions are being tested as we speak. I'm not saying don't come up with a better one, but it's a very active area of innovation because of the magnitude of the problem. What I would say is, if you assume that there is a way that these systems are interoperable and allow one to access the information one needs, you still have a major gap to bridge of how do you take that information and communicate it in ways that are manageable, informative, and also deals with uncertainty, because there's going to be uncertainty in any of these decisions one makes, and we're not very good at quantifying uncertainty and in speaking about uncertainty. But ultimately, one has to integrate it, because having this plan, this roadmap, is really a critical part of care. One of the hardest things cancer patients face is uncertainty. When you go for an MRI, waiting for that result is incredibly difficult, and more difficult than actually having the result, whatever it may be. And it's the same thing. If you don't have a treatment plan, you don't know what you should be expecting. So a long-winded answer to a very important problem that will have to dovetail with these plans, but perhaps not one where the major focus should be. Other questions?
I would say thank you. This is from Venkata.
Okay, you're welcome, Venkata. Well, if not, I think I'm going to turn it back over to the hosts again on behalf of all my colleagues at Sanofi. Thank you for doing this. Yeah. Sure. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So this is Venkat Sai. So what I don't understand is when one-on-one consultations with the doctors are so prominent right now, why aren't the patient, like the bigger hospitals, adopting the systems for multidisciplinary teams? Is it like they aren't able to maintain contact between the doctors, or is it like between the closed and confined spaces, the communication is more effective without any device interactions?
Yeah, so it's probably all of the above. Doctors uh, increasingly have less time to spend with patients, and sort of the paradoxical effect of all the advances in electronic healthcare records and systems is doctors spend more time inputting information into systems than they do now interacting with patients. And that's a problem that also has to get solved. But it is, as you point out, cancer care is often multidisciplinary. You may need surgical expertise from a radiation therapist, social workers, psychosocial support. And centers often are not set up to provide all that care in addition. What that translates to is sometimes disconnects between the plan from one part of the team versus the plan from the other part of the team. So it's an integration of information, but then I would say it's also, well, how can we communicate? We know the doctor is going to need to spend time with a patient and family, but that's going to need to be supplemented. The era of, unfortunately, a doctor being expert enough to manage all components of this, I think, is behind us. There have to be solutions that could be one-on-one solutions, but could also be other ways that we communicate today that we can continually go back to for patients and families. So a long-winded answer to tell you, yes, it's all of those things.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Well, okay. I know there's another speaker coming up, I think. So I'm going to turn it back to the team, and good luck today. We look forward to the outcome.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I think we actually have a couple more minutes if you do have time, good. Peter, and then.
I do. Yeah, I just don't want to run into someone else's time. Go ahead.
Nope, all good.
2 minutes in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, this is Tanir. I'm from India. Now, in India, almost every patient is having the contact of most of the doctors, and many a times what happens that they call up the doctor or they get into a video chat and all. Now, for cancer treatment, how effective is this online mode of treatment, where the online mode of treatment is also behind a paywall, both as a business strategy as well as as a solution to cancer treatment for the patients who are in need of it in this COVID time?
So I think it's a great question. And the long-term impact of COVID when we emerge from this pandemic will be, I do think that healthcare will have some fundamental changes. Yes, there is always going to be the need to come to a doctor's office, hospital, but I do think we will increasingly think about not how do you bring the patient to the treatment, but how do you bring the treatment to the patient. Not how do you bring the research, not how do you bring the patient to research, but how do you bring research to the patient. So I think there's an opportunity to learn from what the lessons we're learning in COVID-19, that clearly that there are components of care that probably are more effectively delivered remotely than having a patient who may not be feeling 100%, come in, find parking, wait in the waiting room, wait in an examination room, when most of what's needed is a discussion of results, a discussion of plans. So I do think it's fundamentally going to change healthcare, including cancer care. But we are most certainly at a very beginning of an evolution that will occur later. From the business perspective, that will have to evolve as well. It certainly has put financial strains on many healthcare systems because of the way healthcare is paid for in the U.S., and I suspect it has strained systems globally, but the U.S. is probably at one end of that spectrum.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer.
Okay, Tanya, I'm going to, I think, turn it back to you now, if that's all right.
Yes, that's totally fine.
And wish everyone success today.